What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Pick Swap podcast. It's back up early in the morning. Me and Sean are, early birds. You know how we do it. So it's me and Shawnee B. What's up, Sean?
Not much. The late night trip taking a toll already. So a couple more late night games to go, but we're hanging in there.
At least tonight's at 9 and not
Yeah.
10 or 10:30. Those
Plus we go
10:30 starts
massively
are,
better.
yeah.
Massively
Oh
better.
yeah. Starting at 9 and ending at like 11ish is way better than starting at like 10, 10:30 and finishing at 12, 12:30.
Mm-hmm.
Not fun on those nights, and especially when the Sixers lose by 30.
Yeah.
So miserable night on Tuesday. Just tell me how you felt about the whole thing. You know, they were down by 30 early on in the second half.
Yeah, there was not a lot of a game going on. Pretty much since even there were signs of it getting out of hand in the first quarter, and the Sixers kind of battled back in to fight that. I think it ended 30-28 at the end of the first. And then from there it was downhill. It was pretty much a one-way Jazz game. Not a ton of takeaways. This team just simply is lacking the bodies and the numbers at this point, and they've competed their hearts out with everybody that's there, but you can just see the lack of numbers and the lack of just available players and available impact players is definitely catching up to this team. So definitely in need of reinforcements. Thibault and Embiid are still out tonight versus the Nuggets, but we definitely need guys back, and specifically Joel Embiid. This team's missing its identity without him, and we just need a guy to just play around.
Yeah, it's at first it was like kind of nice seeing these like smaller role guys in like bigger roles and being able to flourish, and a lot of guys took advantage of that. Furkan was really good early. Niang was great early. Drummond, like you said, we talked about on Tuesday, like we're getting the full dose of Drummond, and we realized why he's a backup and why
Mm-hmm.
Furkan only gets a certain amount of minutes per game. And I still love Niang, but like again,
Yeah.
you can only play him so much for what it's worth. He is a role player, he is a bench player, and like it's kind of showing that now, especially the fact that they're going on what now 6 games of having to play like 30 plus minutes a game. Some of these guys are not built for that and not used to that either. So I think the fatigue is catching up to them definitely. And the fact that like you're asking these guys to create and generate offense when that's normally they're the beneficiary of offense created for them. So aside from like Maxi and like Furkan at times, but I do want to talk about Furk a little bit because he's really struggled over the last couple games.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but like you said, this was just a really awful game, like basically from start to finish, and it like really was not enjoyable at
Yeah.
any part that I can remember.
Yeah, and for Niang specifically, I was really hoping for a Niang revenge game coming back to the Jazz. 30 minutes, 7 points, 2 steals, 3 rebounds. Didn't quite do it for me. The Sixers only had 3 guys in double figures: Toby with 12, Maxey with 16, and Shake with 18. So 85 points overall is never going to get it done. Struggling to score. Offense didn't look great. The whole team just didn't quite click. So wash that one away and move on to the next. But I like to talk some Furkan too. So he's definitely been struggling seriously lately. And in the Utah game, 34 minutes, 2 of 12 from the field, 0-6 from 3, 5 rebounds, 6 points. What are your takes on Furk?
Man, this shot looks bad. Like
Yeah.
it looks really bad, and it wasn't just last night. It was the game before, and the game before. What we had a pick swap parlay that hit. Well, which game was that? Was that
Uh,
Raptors?
I believe so. I'm
So
pretty
in
sure.
that game, he was like 2 of 12 or 2 of 15 from the field or something, and 1 of 11 from 3. Like he goes in with the confidence to shoot, which is great. But dude, I normally Ferg shoots the ball off that. Like you texted me the other night against the Jets. He pumped fake and the guy flew by him. He doesn't
Yes.
normally miss that shot, and he missed like badly. And it seems like every time he's been shooting, it's looked ugly out of his hand. And I don't know if it's like the wrist injury that he's been fighting through, um, or just the fact that he's getting so many more minutes than normal, or if he's just in a little bit of a slump. Like Ferg is a little bit of an inconsistent player, as we know, but he had kind of cut down on those bad nights that he's been having. But we've seen like 2 or 3 in a row. Not that I'm terribly concerned, especially once he becomes like less of the main contributor offensively, like off the bench or in a starting lineup where he's asked to do a lot more. But it definitely has been discouraging seeing Furkan struggle.
For sure. I would like to see some point guard Ferk back. And to me, I loved seeing that early. Like, he actually really impressed me with the reads he was making. The threat to shoot opened up the pick and roll so much. And just there was like an ability there. And that's also not a seamless fit, but I do think that would be something to just kind of get him going. And the biggest issue here to me is Shake Milton with the bench piece, and I've been incredibly frustrated with him. And we're coming off an 18-point game from him, so not maybe the best time to nitpick, but some of the decision making with just going 1-on-5 on the break and forcing layups and just trying to make things happen that aren't there is so frustrating to me. He looks to like a veteran point guard that's like lost a step, except he's like 24 and in the prime of his career. And my concern with Shake is that we've kind of hoped for him to be this role for so much, and he had such like an ascension so quickly that I don't know if he's necessarily the player that we hoped he would be. And like there's times where he's fine and he still has like an NBA ability. Like I'm not completely hating on him, but he's just not what like I was hoping he would turn into. And I don't see any room for growth as far as his playmaking. I don't think I think he's less of a point guard than Maxey, and I'm just struggling to see what exactly to do with him. Like he's not a second unit guy that can run it. He's a guy that goes and gets buckets on his own, but he's just not good enough at that either. So I've had a little bit too much of Shake. I would prefer Furkan to run with the second unit with that, and I don't know. I'm just over the Shake experience a little bit.
Yeah, no, I totally get that, and I definitely agree. I think he needs the Tobias Harris treatment in terms of like you need to attack on dribbles, straight lines, get to the rims, or you need to shoot right away. Like minimizing his like just dribbling the ball a ton and like trying to go side to side and get past his defender. Like while he is sometimes good at that and he generates offense in that way, and sometimes you can rely on that, especially when you need offense, like in the Jazz game. But like in general, he needs to be, a secondary ball handler that's catching and driving or catching and shooting or, just shortening up his time with the ball in his hands and making him make decisions on a better basis is I think where I think he falls off in that sense. But no, I definitely agree where he's been like no one's looked really good, honestly. And like I'm thinking back to the Bucks game and there's a couple minutes left and he passes it out and Furkan throws it right back to him, which is like a mistake in general. And Giannis is guarding him and he dribbles around, goes to his left and like throws up a kind of like a floater and like
Yeah,
hits
that's
nothing but the
ugly.
backboard. I'm like, I don't
That
know, man. It's just stuff like that he does like way more often than he should, and it's very frustrating at times.
Yeah, that play is like the what sticks in my mind for Shake the most this
Yeah,
year. And to be honest, part of this is a usage issue with like since he's gotten here, and this dates back to Shake going out of his mind against Doc Rivers when Doc was still coaching the Clippers, his 37-point game where he shot crazy from three. So I think Doc had this perceived notion of Shake going in about this guy is ridiculous. Even his quotes at the beginning was like the league hasn't caught up to Shake yet and all this stuff. And
I
just
know.
Shake Milton is just not that guy. He's not he can't light up a score. He's Doc has tried to make him this Lou Williams fire off the bench, just instant scoring, and he's just not quite at that level to be able to do that. And that Bucks play to me is such like a clear example. Like he literally dribbled out, saw he's 1-on-1 with Giannis, said, I'm not having that pass that. Furkan gives it right back. He's
Which
just
is a
like,
mistake on Furkan's part to like send it
yeah,
right back to him.
100%. And then it's just like, well, now I got to take this. I can't be like looking like I don't want any part of it. So then he puts his head down and just does his kind of throw his body, fling it around, and like you said,
Yeah.
just clanked off the backboard. So some is definitely a usage issue, and there just has to be kind of a tempered expectations for what this guy can actually bring. But I would like to get Shake back, reeled back into some sort of productive role.
Yeah, and I think that's again something that might once everyone's back and healthy. Like I think his minutes diminish a bit when Matisse gets back. Isaiah Joe has been not like really unimpressive. Like we had a lot of high hopes for him as well.
I don't think he's got enough opportunity to say that though. He had 5 quick points in the Jazz game. He was a little bit of a bright spot to me in the Jazz game.
Yeah, I mean early, but it's just like sometimes he shoots. Like I thought, like I don't know, maybe it's just the summer league effect on me, where I saw him and he was like lighting it up and he was making everything, and then like in the preseason he was making everything, and I was like, it's like again he hasn't had a lot of chance and he missed some time too with COVID and everything, so it's been a little bit difficult. But yeah, going back to Shake and looking at that play specifically, when we're talking about the Giannis the play against the Bucks, looking at that play, my assumption is that that was an ISO play for Shake. Like looking at the way the offense was set up, it was like you have one side Shake, do whatever you're gonna do, and if you're really ISOing Shake Milton against a two-time Defensive Player of the Year and Giannis Antetokounmpo and like asking him to create offense like that, like you're kind of setting him up to fail. So I don't know, maybe it's a combination of like Shake just isn't as good as we originally perceived him to be, but also like he's being asked to do a lot, and Doc really thinks highly of him. So yeah, that's just not great. So to move on from that, another guy that's been struggling a little bit, I mean, that definitely struggled against the Jazz was Seth Curry. Obviously, we're not terribly worried about him, but he was, 5 points, 1 of 8 from the field, 1 of 3 from three, like just not enough shots.
Yeah.
Like only 8 shots from Seth Curry in a game where you don't have Embiid, and I think that also helps. Like I think Curry plays very well off Joel Embiid, so it hurts when Embiid's not in the lineup for him, but just not enough. Like you just need to make sure that he shoots more than 8 times in a game, I feel like.
Yeah, one of the limitations in Curry's game is, frankly, I mean, he's like 6'3", 6'2", 6'3". He gets chased off the line by more athletic defenders and struggles to create separation, but against more athletic defenders, especially with longer wingspan. The whole scheme of Utah's defense is chasing guys off the 3-point line,
Yeah.
funneling him into Gobert, and Curry struggled with that. He couldn't find his area to get separation, open out wide and from the perimeter. He likes the like mid range pull up, but beyond that, he doesn't attack the basket as much as like I would like. And I mean, he's not going to win that matchup going against Gobert too often. So not a tough night for him. Same with the Raptors was a tough night for a lot of that reason too. The wingspan's just facing him. It's just tough for a guy who doesn't have a particularly quick release at 6'3". It's frustrating, and that is what comes with the limitation with Curry. Grand scheme of things, not worried. He's still shooting out of his mind. Unbelievable. He had a little bit of a cold night. Has had a little bit of a cold stretch. The numbers are going to come back to somewhat human, but he's still been absolutely absurd. And I think Embiid coming back will be a huge difference maker for Curry too.
Yeah, absolutely. They play so much off of each other with like the dribble handoffs and everything. I do want to point out really quick, like I've been a Jazz hater, and like by no means am I a Jazz sympathizer right now. They're one of the like they're on the short list of teams that I just really cannot ever root for. But they are damn good, man. Like they really are. And as much as I hate Rudy Gobert and I hate what they do, like their scheme and what they're able to do with him defensively, and like they just shoot the lights out. I
Mhm.
feel like every time the Sixers play them, they just shoot the lights out, and it's frustrating to see them be like a good team. And I don't think they'll ever like the way that they play and relying so heavily on 3 pointers and Rudy Gobert dunks, like that just won't ever translate to like a championship or like a real deep playoff run. But like they're a very good regular season team, and they just like, I mean, the Sixers are not in a place to really beat that team right now, especially on the road without Embiid, without Matisse. But I feel like every time we play them, they shoot the lights out. But I think that's like a consistent night for them.
Yeah, no, they're always at the top for 3-point attempts, 3-point percentage. They just got a flurry of guys that can get hot. When we talk about Bogdanovich, what did he end with against us? He ended
He
with
always kills us. He always kills
Yeah,
us.
he had 27, 5 of 7 from three.
Jesus.
All these guys could shoot. Clarkson with 20 off the bench, another typical for him. And that guy's
Yeah.
never afraid to shoot. He shot it 20 times, 8 of 20, 4 of 12 from three. Like they just have a abundance of guys that can catch fire. Joe Ingles is another off the bench who always gets me. So they credit to them for building to their identity. I hate Rudy Gobert as a centerpiece of a team. I just like he does exactly what they need, and like you said, schematically, it's set up perfect for the way they
What
play.
he
But
does.
I hate Rudy Gobert, and I saw early on in the season there was him at the top of the MVP ladder, which infuriated me. And I'm sure that's already changed by now, and he won't climb his way back into there. But he definitely is an integral part of what they do.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, he makes it so easy for their perimeter defense because
Yeah,
they can fly out and chase away shooters and close out really hard and give their guys a step going in because they're kind of just like letting him. But and so that kind of leads into our next like conversation point is we were talking before we started recording. I'm just like I was saying I was frustrated they didn't give like the small ball look much time to go because like they went on a couple runs and Andre Drummond just like isn't he doesn't handle the ball enough. He doesn't shoot at all, and like he just can't create from the perimeter at all. So the issue was like guys were getting downhill, beating their defenders like off the dribble, going towards the rim. But like you have a 7'2", like elite shot blocker at the rim, and he kind of deterred everyone that was coming into the paint. And they didn't give Paul Reed a chance until late in the third. You said you wanted to shout out Charles Bassey, and we can do that. But like I was just frustrated to not see them like change up the look at all. Like Andre Drummond just wasn't going to do it. He just wasn't going to in that game. And I think when something looks like such a wash so early on, and you're kind of like, okay, what we're doing is not going to work. Why don't we move on to something else instead of just running into a wall every time? Like, it just made no sense to me that they didn't at least try to change up their looks a little bit. And they gave Bassie a chance right at the end of the first, and he did well. I was, because he's at least athletic the way that Andre Drummond isn't. But I was
Yeah.
just frustrated to see them not really give the small ball look a chance.
Yeah, I mean, to Doc's credit, I thought they did in this game. I mean, I don't think there's any kind of concoction of play style or rosters or rotations that ends up winning this game just based on what we
No.
had. When we did go small, Gobert absolutely killed us. Just, I mean, his 7'2" frame, his huge ass arms. He ended with 6 of 8 from the field, 17 rebounds, and 15 points with a plus 19 rating. We were out rebounded all over the place, and
Yeah.
it ended up on the night 56 to 42. We were out rebounded, and that actually ended closer than it was at times. There were many points in the game where they had 20 plus more rebounds than us. We went with Niang first. He was the first one to take Drummond out, and we did go on a little run there with, like you said, it was effective in like getting Gobert out of the paint on the Sixers offensive end, but just defensively, like when the Jazz can get, like, I love Niang. I'm so
Yeah.
happy he's here, but he's just not big enough to be a small ball five in the way that we hope. Like, he's a generous 6'7". He's not quick. He doesn't have a high vertical. He tries and he gives effort and
Yeah.
does his best there, but he simply is not made out for that. And when Tobias Harris and George Niang are kind of trying to combine to be like a center, that's just not going to get it done, especially against a guy who, to his credit, is one of the better centers around this league. And I mean, I was surprised to see Doc go with Bassie as the next option, and he spoke very glowingly about him after the game. Talked about his high IQ, how he made the defensive reads properly. He said he was frustrated by Andre Drummond's lack of like knowledge in this, basically, and that it shouldn't be the rookie coming in knowing what to do and the vet confused. So there was some frustrations with Drummond post game. Bassie, I mean, I think there's a lot to like with this guy, and I think he is a little bit threat to the B-ball Paul love in my heart here. He's fluid, he's athletic. I mean, we only saw 9 minutes of play, so I can't overgas what I think about him. But I do think there's something there with his athleticism, his movement, and he brought energy. I was happy with what I saw from him, and I do think he made a difference.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, I thought that they should have went with Bassie, and I thought like Paul Reed didn't get a chance until the end of the third quarter when they were already down like
Yeah.
20 at that point. And well, you're gonna give up a lot of interior defense. We were bringing in Paul Reed, but like he's super high energy, high motor. He's going to give effort all the entire time he's in the game, and just like it made no sense to me to, because he's also switchable though too. Like
Oh
whereas
yeah.
Drummond is not, and if you switch him and you're trying to hedge, and someone else like the backside defender has to run over and help, and then Drummond has to recover to the corner, like it just never that is not going to work, especially against such an elite pick and roll team, the way that like Rudy Gobert sets that threat up like that. So I don't know. This is not that it's necessarily like a huge concern, but like we've mentioned it before, like Drummond's ability to play pick and roll defense and come playoff time, and
Yeah.
having a guy that can do that is something that's really important for this team. And like I don't know if that's something they need to try to acquire. Maybe they go after a guy like Kelly Olynyk or someone like come trade deadline or something. But like I feel like that's a main point of emphasis, especially when Embiid's not playing.
Yeah, I think we're looking at kind of a similar checklist for what the team is missing. Ben Simmons stuff aside, and the top level creation necessities aside, like it's besides that, it's kind of the need a stretch big and needed a ball handlers in the same way we were last year. And we went with George Hill. I still think ball handling is a bigger need for this team moving forward. There's not really a true point guard on this team still. Maxi's doing his best, but he's got so many areas which he's growing and improving on. It's unfair to just expect this guy to be able to do everything. And he's
Yeah.
been tremendous so far, so I don't want to throw anything on him. Shake Milton, not a true point guard. Furkan, I blows my mind he's even in this conversation, but
Yeah.
also not a true point guard. So I do think there's a bigger need for ball handler there. And when we talk about B-Ball Paul, I don't look at playing B-Ball Paul as like going small. Like he's listed at 6'9". He's got a 7'2" wingspan. He plays bigger than he is. The energy and effort that he brings, he's always around the boards, gobbling up rebounds. Like he's can play legitimate center, and he's kind of learning to play the four in the NBA. Like he's definitely more natural as a center. So I I've said from the start that I think the growing pains are worth it with Paul, and I think like the little kind of madness moments and out of control moments are worth taking now for what he can be. Because I do think he's good enough defensively to compete in playoffs and be that switchable guy. He's not a guy that can get like bullied. Like when Drummond's out there and you can kind of pick and roll and get an ISO with Drummond and a guy's guard, like he's getting cooked every time. I don't feel that way about Paul. I think B-Ball Paul can hang in there enough. He's active enough with his hands to just make things happen. His feet are fluid enough that, like, to me, that's something. And Bassey's definitely showed signs of that as well, which I'm excited to see. But I think B-Ball Paul needs to continue to be fed minutes, and it was disappointing to not see him subbed in until 2 minutes left in the third.
Yeah, no, and that's what I mean. Like the hybrid of like we talked about how going small kind of hurt them, especially defensively, and Rudy Gobert kind of killed them in that sense. Like when I think of bringing B-Ball Paul in, I think because he's kind of a hybrid between a 5 and a 4, and a guy that can run around the court and is high energy and high motor, like with a team that spreads the floor the way that Utah does, giving him a chance to, kind of bridge the gap between like the center and the perimeter defense of being able to do kind of both. And if he gets beat off the dribble and he's going towards the rim, like he's able to chase down block. He's lengthy enough to at least bother shooters. Like there's a lot of upside for him defensively. And then offensively, when you think about what Rudy Gobert would have to do to guard him, obviously B-Ball Paul is going to be attacking the glass and doing that thing, but he doesn't need that much attention. And he's able to get all over the place. Like he will just run Rudy Gobert from sideline to top of the key to baseline, like, at least moving him out of the way so you can get the ball to the opposite side and make Rudy Gobert either play perimeter defense and switch or, have to recover out of the corner to try to block a shot. And like, they just didn't really give that a shot. Yeah, I think I wanted to see more Paul Reed, especially in games of blowout. Like you were down by 20 at half. Like why not at least give him a chance to, and then you went right back to Drummond and it just was the same exact thing, like the same story that started the game. And again, not that they would have won and it changes anything, but I thought that I would see Paul Reed have a much higher impact or higher minutes or just like more playing time in this one because I thought that he was going to have a bigger impact.
Yeah, me as well. When we look at the center rotation, Drummond ended with 12 minutes, Paul played 14, and Bassey played 9. So none of those three played like a large amount of minutes.
Yeah.
And one thing Bassey and Paul Reed do both have in common is both have monster blocks on Giannis already this season. So
Yeah,
love how that sounds.
Yeah, it's and maybe that is like what they're gonna end up doing, and it's still time will tell if Paul Reed will become a stretch big or if Bassey will be able to continue growing in that sense. So they have the guys, the young guys, but I think like you said, a stretch big is definitely because Niang is just not big enough, like you said, and as much as you really enjoy what he brings, having a guy, maybe it's a Kelly. I'm trying to think of anyone else that's like would potentially be on the market as a stretch big, but it's hard to. There's not a lot of them in the NBA that can play legitimate 5. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. But we can move on and talk about the Denver game a little bit. Kind of just put the Jazz game in our rear view because not too much to talk about there. It was a really ugly game. So essentially the same exact roster we're going into tonight. Is there anything you can see? Like I think personally, like what do you think the starting lineup's going to be? Because it was It was Maxey, Shake, Furk.
Yeah.
Or no, it was
Or
Maxey,
Danny
Seth.
Green.
I'm talking about against the Jazz. It was Maxey, Seth, Harris, Drummond, and Furkan or Shake?
Shake started. It was Maxey, Seth, Shake, Toby, and Drummond.
Okay. So do you see the same lineup, or do you think that they're going to switch it up at all?
I wouldn't mind going back to the B-Ball Paul starting lineup. I really like. I'm very much in Paul's corner for developmentally, and I would just like to see that really. But I don't want Shake with the starter. I don't really know what I want to do with Shake Milton anymore. So I guess that's where my biggest struggle is. 35 minutes last game is way too much for him. So I don't know what they end up doing. I do think the Nuggets is a more winnable game than the Jazz game, so we have that to hope for. But there's just simply not a lot like we can do with the options that are on the table.
Yeah. I was kind of thinking because I wanted to say I think that it would be good because this team is big. Like the Nuggets play big.
Yeah,
they have a big lineup. Why not give Reed a shot to be, a spark to at least get this team going energy wise? Because I think that's just enough what they would need right now. Like they look flat. They look dead going into every game. Like
He was
again,
effective too. Like he was effective as like a spark, do the little things with the starters when he did get that opportunity.
no, exactly, and I think that would be just enough to at least give them like enough energy to like push through this game and get through this game. Because if you can get through this one, you're kind of assuming that at least one, but hopefully both of Joel and Matisse will be back for Saturday's game against Portland. So you can kind of like just if you can push through this one, get like and Paul Reed can be that guy. Like he hasn't been shouldering all the minutes the way that a lot of these guys have. Let him come in and play and give yourself, and if he's not playing well, if he's getting cooked or if he's having issues, like you just move on. But like
Yeah.
at least early on that he's not going to be a factor. But I genuinely think the way that we've talked about him and what we've seen, like even if he's not scoring or he's not doing whatever, like he's going to bring energy. He's going to play defense. He's going to fight for loose balls. He's going to get rebounds. Like that is enough to at least spark something. And I think it would be worth a shot for him to get the start, with a team that's been struggling and, maybe they have to play big to help out. And like you can go Maxi Seth, Tobias, Paul Reed, Andre Drummond. Like that's a big lineup that kind of counteracts the fact that they've been playing really small. Like Shake playing basically then now you're playing a 3 guard lineup with two guys that are below, 6'3". So
Yeah.
it just doesn't work that way all that often.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, it's tough. Like they're like we keep saying, like they're just short bodies, numbers, energy, everything. I would love for them to squeeze a win tonight and just get back in the win column. It's gonna be difficult matching up with Jokic. I'm nervous about pretty much any extent. I would like to see Paul Reed on him as much as possible, and also Paul Reed after sitting on the bench for three and three quarters last game. He came out and gave the best defense that Rudy Gobert had seen all game. And that first possession specifically, you saw him frustrated. And Gobert was pulled pretty shortly after, so we didn't get to see an extended look at that. But I think Jokic is going to have his way with Drummond if that's the matchup, specifically because Jokic is a guy that floats out of the perimeter and tries to create. And I hope Andre Drummond does not get into a pass off with Jokic, and there's none of that.
Oh.
But I would like to see Paul on him as much as possible.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And because again, he could just be a pest and he can keep up with him and he can stay around him. And, he has active hands. Not like, and obviously, Jokic is the reigning MVP we're talking about. Like, I'm not saying that Paul Reed's going to go in and stop him by any means, but he could at least like be in his face and annoy him and bug him all night, which is like basically at this point all you can ask for from a defensive standpoint against Jokic. But I mean, is there winning in this game is like, I think if you are able to fight through and get a win tonight, like this might be one of the better wins if you're able to get it this season. Like this would be very interesting. And again, like we're talking about, this isn't the end all be all. This is game 17 of in the regular season. Like it's just not that big of a deal. But like it just would feel like a very big win if they're able to get this.
Yeah, I mean, they've competed throughout this stretch, and there's been multiple games that they've been in and had a chance to win. I've taken them all as like moral victories for that. The issue is they've now had that many that they've had been chances to win and let slip away. So now they're kind of in not a great spot with that. 8-7 on the year. They'd fall to 500 if they lose tonight. I think it's pretty likely that they come back from this road trip below 500. Not something I'm concerned about moving forward. Once Joel comes back, this conversation changes greatly. And I mean, everything will not be right in the world because there's still certainly holes, but it just makes every game significantly more winnable. So it's still about just hanging in there. If they can squeeze tonight, I think that would be massive for just morale, just support, and just reinforcements are coming. So just compete your heart out while we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been a battle. I applaud all these guys for kind of pushing through. I'm sure this has been a difficult time for them in this stretch of games. Just, again, asking all these guys to do things that they're not being paid to do what they're being asked to do like most of the time. So they're playing above their pay grade right now. And, it's kind of showing in the struggles. Need a big game out of Tobias. I think he'll be a huge X factor if they're able to win. Paul Reed could be as well. So, we'll definitely keep up with that. I'm sure we'll be tweeting about it. We're going to cut this one off a little bit short today, unless you have anything more, Sean.
No, I'm all good.
So we do have an interview with Dr. Rami Hashish. And we talked for, 10 to 15 minutes. It was like 15 minutes around Embiid's meniscus tear, what the recovery is like, what his, where the pain's coming from, things like that. It was a ton of fun and really like informational. I didn't know anything that like I was very kind of just sitting back, not saying much, kind of just listening to everything he could say because totally above my head. I have no idea anything about meniscus tears or, knee joints or anything. So that was super fun, and I'm really happy we were able to do that. So that'll be up at the end of this podcast. Those will be up on YouTube separately, though. So if you want to check that out, the interview itself, go to the YouTube, check that out. This will be up later today before the game. The Sixers play the Nuggets tonight. They play Portland on Saturday, and then they play Sacramento on Monday, I think.
Yes. Yeah, Sacramento Money, Portland Saturday. Yep, you nailed it.
So we'll miss 3 games. We'll have tonight, Saturday. I'm going to talk to you back again on Tuesday morning. So stay put. Check out, we're going to try to, we've been doing more with Airspace. We're going to be doing some more stuff with that. Check out the TikTok. Follow us on Twitter at PickSwapPod. The YouTube. Follow Sean at Sean_Bernard1. Follow me at JSBrain17. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll talk to you guys soon. How's it going, guys? This is a special edition of the Pick Swap podcast. I'm James Brand. I'm here with Sean Bernard as always. Sean, introduce our special guest for us.
Yeah, and we have a special guest today. We have Dr. Rami Hashish, who is the founder of the National Biomechanics Institute and founder of Chief of Technology Officer of Parento. Holding 2 doctorate degrees and a PhD in biomechanics and a doctorate in physical therapy, Dr. Rami has been retained as an expert witness for more than 1,000 occasions, examining injuries in sports, the workplace, motor vehicle, and aviation accidents. So we're super happy to have him here today and learn a little bit about the whole Joel Embiid knee injury and how the management has been going. So thank you for joining us today.
Of course, it's my pleasure.
So to kick it off, just kind of, obviously Joel Embiid injuries have been talked about through his entire career here. And kind of the most notable of late has been the torn lateral meniscus, which obviously dates back to last year, and we're seeing the lingering effects into this year. So start off with, what exactly is a meniscus tear?
So the meniscus is this piece of cartilage or tissue that's basically between the knee, right? So you have your thigh bone, also called your femur, and then you have your tibia or your shin bone. So between your thigh bone and your shin bone are 2 pieces of tissue or cartilage that serve as shock absorbers, and those are your meniscus. So I actually have a anatomy model here. I think you guys can see it. So essentially you have your thigh bone, you have your shin bone, and basically these 2 blue circles, those are what's your meniscus. So those basically serve as shock absorbers to the knee joint. And then, of course, in the name, torn meniscus is just a tear of that cartilage.
Gotcha. And now, for what traditionally is the recovery for that?
So it depends. So it depends on the magnitude of the tear. So sometimes when the meniscus tears or the cartilage tears, it can be big, it can be small. And sometimes, depending on the size and how it's torn, it can kind of latch on to the bone, and you kind of feel like this clicking. And so in some instances, it can be really bad. In some instances, can have a pretty quick recovery. So rehab-wise, if you have a torn meniscus and it's pretty bad, you could be anywhere from 3 to 6 months. Or in some instances, maybe much less than that if it's kind of a small tear. If you have surgery, then it can fluctuate depending on a bunch of different things, such as your size and what type of surgery you had and how bad was the tear and what they did. So kind of depends.
Gotcha. And we saw Joel Embiid soldier through the postseason and kind of play through the tear. Is most of that all just kind of pain management, or is there any kind of concern for making it worse or structural concerns there?
No, there's structural concerns. So that's the problem. Like you'd hope with a lot of these injuries that people kind of push through that it's just a pain management thing. But no, with the knee and with the cartilage of the knee, that's unfortunately not the case, right? So I'm just going to use that anatomy model again, right? So let's say you have a tear of that meniscus, right? If you have a tear of the cartilage, and so with every single step and every single jump and every single bang, you may make that tear worse. So it may increase the amount of tear. And then what's especially bad is if it starts tearing and kind of breaking down more and more, you end up having kind of this bone on bone action, right? So if you have bone on bone, then you can have a complete breakdown of your knee as a whole. And now you may start having some effects on the bone, at the ends of the bone, and having degrading of the ends of the bone. So it can really result in some long lasting issues.
Mm-hmm. And I guess the most interesting aspect of this to me is it seems that Joel Embiid elected not to get surgery on it this offseason. So is this something that just kind of goes away with time and he's able to rest it up, or is surgery required to fix it?
No, you don't need surgery required to fix it, but obviously depends on the tear. So obviously, I'm going to defer to the surgeons on that one. They probably saw something that they felt that it may not necessitate surgery, or that it may be just an option. And then it's very common for people to opt against surgery, right? So one of the things, or what's commonly done in surgery, is what's referred to as a meniscectomy, where they basically take off a piece of the meniscus, right? So you're not getting that back. So it makes sense for an athlete who's in his prime, who's young, may not always want to jump the surgical route if it means that they're taking away a piece of my tissue, right? So you can't really fault them for that. But again, that's typically a collaborative decision between the athlete and the surgeon.
Yeah, and personally, to be honest, I think a lot of the decision making on Embiid's part is frankly just sick of getting surgeries, and he's a guy that's constantly been being worked on. So I don't think he was anxious to kind of go through more than he's has to. But one of the things that I kind of have been disappointed on is early on in the season, there's been a lot of occasions of him grabbing at the knee and like showing signs of pain, and he still has played through as much as he could. Obviously, he's gotten a break due to unfortunately testing positive for COVID and going through that. But during his time on the court, are these, do you think, lingering effects from just what's happening last year? Is this something that he'll just figure out as he goes?
It kind of depends. So if you think of it, so there's that video from last year in the playoffs, I think, where he tore his meniscus, or they say that he tore his meniscus, where he kind of landed, then fell down on his butt and back. But typically, you don't have meniscus tears. They're not always purely traumatic. You can tear your meniscus if you have a lot of twisting and you have a lot of force. That can certainly happen, but they can also tear just over time. Like they degenerate, or you have bad body mechanics. You kind of load it improperly, or you load it consistently in kind of a bad way, and it can break down over time. So then it takes like less force and less of an impact to tear it. And I'm assuming that's the case with him, right? So specifically, he tore the lateral meniscus, right, which is the meniscus on the outside. So if you think of the knee, if my knees are kind of knock-kneed, right? My knees are knock-kneed. That means I'm placing a lot of pressure on the lateral meniscus, and I'm not placing a lot on the other meniscus. So depending on how your posture is, right? If you're knock-kneed posture and you keep jumping and you jump with a knock-kneed posture, that's going to put too much pressure on the lateral meniscus. It may break down over time, and then it may not take a big event to cause it to completely tear and have all of these pain and symptoms. So getting back to Joel, it kind of depends, right? He has to improve how he lands. He has to improve how he runs. He has to improve how he jumps. And that's not picking on him. That's just a standard thing. When people go through these types of injuries, they sometimes have to change the way in which they move to help prevent them from breaking down in the future.
So one question I have is, like, we see him go through all this process of, injury after injury, and he comes back in a different way every time. What do you think, or what do you suspect as being a recovery process, or during a season where he's feeling the pain from these injuries? What kind of physical therapy or things is he going through on a daily basis to prepare himself to play?
I mean, I think he's doing a lot of stretching. I think he's doing a lot of mobility work of his IT bands, the sides of his hip. I think he's probably doing a lot of strengthening on the sides of his hips to develop the endurance and the strength of his hips to prevent his knees from falling inwards. And I also think he's doing some just generalized, a lot of like coordinated, repetitive motions, just to kind of practice and like in-game simulation, make sure that he's consistently landing in the proper form, running in the proper form, and kind of really working on his, like, the biomechanics of his motion. So it's not just a strength thing, and it's not just a flexibility thing, but it's kind of honing in on the optimal motions and movement patterns. And we can't forget that he's a big guy, right? Like he's a big guy. I mean, so he's putting a lot of stress on his knees. So it's particularly important for somebody like him than somebody who may be a little bit smaller in stature.
And one thing that became somewhat controversial last year with the offseason was just the brace he was wearing. And Joel obviously wasn't a fan of it. He spoke pretty openly about not liking it. how it limited his mobility, and frankly, the numbers backed it up with his jump shot not looking the same and things like that. Are braces kind of a go-to kind of technique for limiting damage with meniscus, and do you think something long-term that is an option?
Do I think it's a long-term option for him? I mean, certainly it's a long-term option because you want to stabilize the knee joint and you want to prevent the knee from falling in and out, and you want to kind of control kind of bad motions that he may regularly be exposed to or regularly perform. So yeah, knee braces are important. I think you see that also in the NFL with, a quarterback if they hurt themselves, or a running back, but you also see it quite, regularly with offensive linemen because they want to kind of prevent the motion of the knee and promote the stability. Now, that doesn't mean that he's going to perform as well. I mean, because it does limit his mobility, and that's obviously one of his traits is being, a bigger guy, strong, but still very mobile, and taking that away may obviously affect his performance.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then like to look at it this way now, he is getting this break, like the unfortunate break because of COVID. It's going to be about 10 or 11 days they see. Is that like enough time period for, it's hard to tell obviously because you're not with him all the time. But like as a recovery period or just a chance to give that knee a break, like, is that enough time? Like by any means, is that close to enough time for him to come back at like full strength or close to full strength?
I think it depends on the extent of his tear. I think kind of the recent evaluation of his knee, they suggested that it was something really small. And yeah, I think the 10-day break, COVID is obviously terrible, but this may prove to be a blessing in disguise to his knee, because that extra time will certainly allow not only rest, but rehab. So no, I certainly think that this is probably beneficial, at least for his knee and his legs, certainly.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, load management has been another kind of hot topic around NBA, but do you think kind of just limiting his minutes is also like a beneficial way in the future? Or do you think this is something that kind of, it doesn't matter how often he plays, it's just kind of if he's playing or not, or is like playing limited minutes a fair way to kind of conserve him?
I don't think limited minutes is the way to do it necessarily. I mean, so when people get tired or when people get fatigued is when they commonly injure themselves. And not only that, when people get tired and when people get fatigued, they start moving differently, and their muscles may fatigue out. And then, so let's take, for instance, after 30 minutes, he's fine, right? He's fine. He's not fatigued. His muscles aren't fatigued. Then there's no really theoretical increased risk of injury. But after 30 minutes, if he has these muscles getting fatigued and now he's moving a little bit differently and he's a little bit labored, or now he's allowing his knee to fall inwards, then yeah, right? So it really depends on his specific response to time, right? He may be able to withstand a 30-minute limit. He may not be able to, but it really depends on when that fatigue starts setting in, particularly around his hips and his knees, that result in kind of maybe his knees falling inwards and some general bad, body mechanics.
Gotcha. Yeah, I definitely think that's rung true with Joel throughout his career. And I love the guy with all my heart. My biggest critique of him has always been just kind of his unwillingness to kind of take care of his body when it comes to diving across the floor or recklessly trying to block a shot when we're up big and stuff like that, where it's just kind of like business decisions need to be made when taking care of your body. So is the only real way, I guess, is just like being smart decisions and I guess understanding the risk reward for different scenarios when it comes to that kind of thing.
And improving your body. So
Yeah.
It's both, right? It has to be a combination of both improving your body and making the right decisions to not put yourself in a situation to get injured. But I mean, also, he's had injury history, and big guys who have had knee injuries and big guys who have had foot injuries, that's not something that typically goes away. You start having to manage it over time and figure out ways to manage it and deal with it. So yeah, there's certainly some business decision things, but there's also some kind of innate things to him that he has to consistently address throughout his career.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, it's tough for any of us to kind of wrap our mind around. This guy is 7 foot plus, 280 pounds. Just like the stress on his body for making everyday life things is something that like it's tough to imagine that. So I guess
we're not used to that. We're not exposed to what he deals with for sure.
Yeah, so I have a hard time putting myself in those shoes too. But other than that, I appreciate you coming on and informing us about this. And thank you so much for the opportunity. And anything you want to say about yourself before you head out?
No, I'm good, guys. It was fun. It was fun. I hope I see Ben Simmons again in a Sixers uniform, though. It was fun to watch him play. So
I love it. I love it.
I don't know if that's going to happen, but man, I'm rooting for it.
All right, there you go. So before you go, that's your prediction. Ben Simmons is back in a Sixers uniform at some point.
I mean, Daryl Morey seems a little bit stuck in his ways, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm hoping for it as a fan, and they gave a little shout out to Ben Simmons during the opening game of the season, saying he's their brother and all. I want to see it. I want to see it on the court, see how that actually plays out.
Yeah, I think that's something we can all get behind. So hopefully Ben Simmons back sooner than later.
For sure.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it, man. I'm sure you have a super busy day and we're kind of creeping in on that. So thank you so much for coming on. We'll definitely talk to you soon.
Thank you. It was fun.